Amateur Traveler is in its 20th year now, but can you imagine if I had people on the show who had never been to the destination, but had just read about it or seen a movie about it? That wouldn't make any sense at all, and you wouldn't listen. We all know how important it is to receive advice from people who know a destination to get the most authentic local experience. And a great option for experiencing this is Explore Worldwide and their authentic small group adventures, led by local tour leaders, perfect for solo travelers who want to meet like-minded people with a desire for adventure. I'm often an independent traveler, but 2 of my last 3 trips were with small group tours because they organize everything and it's a lot easier. If you want to recreate the tour I did to Malta, they have a Malta and Gozo Discovery Tour. I'm intrigued by one of their tours called A Taste of Sicily. The company, again, is Explore Worldwide, and visit exploreworldwide.com to learn more. And thanks to Explore Worldwide for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler. The nights are long, the days are short, and the weather is chilly to downright cold, depending on where you are. It's a good time to slip into a Quince iconic Mongolian cashmere sweaters, which start at only $50. You can treat yourself to everyday luxury at an affordable price with Quince. If you really want to dive into luxury, you can check out their leather handbags, washable silk shirts, and European linen sheet sets. Whatever you're looking for at Quince, all the prices are 50 to 80% less than similar brands, and they do that by partnering directly with top factories and cutting out the middleman. They only work with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing processes. And of course, they use premium fabrics and finishes for that luxury feel in every piece. But you've already heard me rave about my Quince travel pants. Treat yourself this winter without the luxury price tag. Go to quince.com/traveler for 365-day returns plus free shipping on your order. That's QUINCE.com/traveler to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/traveler. And thanks to Quince for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler. Amateur Traveler Podcast, Episode 62. Today, the Amateur Traveler Podcast goes back to New York City with Part 2 of The Big Apple. Welcome to the Amateur Traveler Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Christensen. This episode is brought to you by HotelBook.com, the official site of independent hotels worldwide. HotelBook.com. Stay your way. Stay independent. I have 4 news stories for you today. The first one is probably the most relevant for travelers, especially from the U.S. Congress last week voted again to delay the implementation of the new passport requirements. So the new timeline is beginning January 8th of 2007, next year. A passport will be required for all air travel to or from Canada, Mexico, Central and South America, Caribbean, and Bermuda, but not until June 1st of 2009 will the passport requirements be extended for all land border crossings and sea travel from the above-mentioned destinations. The second news story is bad news for Thailand and for anyone flying through the new international airport. In one weekend, last weekend, that new airport managed to lose 1,200 bags. So something to think about if you're thinking about carry-on through that airport. The third one is an interesting phenomenon. I don't know if you've heard about this, but my kids have done this numerous times. It was an article in USA Today about corn mazes, and you may not live any place near a cornfield, but basically it's an idea of farmers who are taking their cornfields and carving mazes through them, and it's a particular article coming from the St. Paul Pioneer Press in Minnesota. Some nights some of these corn mazes have 1,000 people going through them, and it's a way that they're supporting keeping land under farming that is getting close to urban areas. And we have this out here. I don't know if you have this where you are, but if you haven't, you might be interested in reading this article. Apparently, it first started in Minnesota, at least in 1997, when vegetable farmer Steve Peterson carved a giant T-Rex dinosaur in a cornfield and charged admission. So more links to all those articles in the show notes. One other news story for those of you who are regular listeners to the show. I was just interviewed on Podcast 411. The interview is posted on podcast411.com, and I'll put links to that in the show notes also. Now we get back to New York City with the second half of the interview I did with Michael. I played the first half last week, and for those of you who missed that, you might want to go back and hear that. It dealt particularly with the outer boroughs, or at least it started with the outer boroughs. And so this particular portion of the interview will focus only on Manhattan. I hope you're enjoying it. I was going to say I hope you're enjoying it half as much as I am, but I hope you're enjoying it twice as much as I am. Here's Michael. New York is not cheap in general.
Right.
So best bargains in New York for a tourist.
Oh, well, this is a whole other topic, actually. Electronics are phenomenal values. 40th Century Photo, if it's still around. I actually like B&H Photo.
B&H is good.
Yeah, B&H is really, really good. And, they're online, too. That's the only thing I'm going to say about this at the time of busting my mouth is, you come into New York, and this is really true in, like, pre-internet days. You could really get... People think New York is expensive. Well, New York real estate is expensive, and New York has some of the most expensive restaurants. If you want to blow a lot of money on like phenomenal food, and it's really the name of the chef and the presentation, and you can go to Bergdorf's and Saks Fifth Avenue and all these places and spend $10,000 on a dress. So there are, and in fact, I think your daughter tried on some of them when she was here, and we took a picture, and maybe a $6,000 dress or whatever it was, just so she could say she did it. And but anyways, you can spend more money on something in New York than you could anywhere else, just about, maybe Tokyo, Hong Kong, whatever. But at the same time, you can go down to 14th Street, which is a big east-west thoroughfare, and get all kinds of clothing deals for way cheaper than you'll get, in the suburbs or elsewhere in the country. And so there's lots of good, Chinatown has phenomenal, low-price shopping on everything from dishes to clothing and all kinds of stuff. There's electronic meccas to know about, B&H and 40th Century Photo and J&R Music World and places like that. And then in terms of just my basic groceries, having lived in Silicon Valley, I spend a lot less on, if I know where to shop. That Fairway store that I told you about is really, really phenomenal.
We should pause here, Michael. We have to tell that in terms of knowing where to shop in New York and Michael's fondness for food in New York, is it not true that you would bring food from New York City back to Silicon Valley because you could find things that were better? So, you have a particular standards for food. So when
right.
I want people to understand when you're talking to them about places to eat in New York, we're coming from somebody here who knows some good places.
Right. Well, what he's talking about is while I was in California, I bought a $400 freezer and flew food back from New York and stored it stuck in the freezer. And Chris got to eat some of it. So, anyways, but as a tourist, you're not really going to have a kitchen, right? You're going to be in a hotel, so you're not going to have that availability. But there are two, if you're into food and it's a big thing for you, the Fairway Food Market on 73rd and Broadway, and about 10 blocks north of that is, or less, 79th and Broadway is Zabar's, which is also another really famous West Side eatery. Best cheeses and all kinds of other stuff there. So those two, and Citarellas is all over the city, is very well known too. But you're not going to really, if you want to see like how we eat, that's the place. Those are the places to look, and we eat like nobody else does. So those are good, but I wouldn't necessarily put them on my absolutely must-see lists. But there is one exception here, right next to Zabar's. And there's two of these in the cities, but I would go to this one, and I'm thinking it's 79th and Broadway, but I might be off by a few blocks there. H&H Bagels. So no matter what time you arrive in New York, 2 in the morning, 4 in the morning, whenever your plane lets you off, you will go to H&H Bagel on the 79th and Broadway and wait online. And when you get to the front, you don't ask for a particular flavor of bagel. There could be onion, there could be, I don't know, cinnamon or raisin and wheat, or whatever your bagel flavor is. You ask them what's hot, and you put your hand up on the glass and you feel the different flavors, and you figure out which bagels are hot. Because if they've cooled down to room temperature, you're not buying them. And the other thing to do is to just wait in the back of the store and watch, so that when the big bin of hot bagels, steamy bagels, comes out from the back where they just cooked them and they dump them into the bin, you get online and you ask for those bagels, whatever flavor they may be. And H&H is a little snotty because they won't put the cream cheese on for you. So before you get online, you have to look to your left and get your cream cheese, Philadelphia, whatever cream cheese, out of the case, whatever you want to drink, and pay for it all at once and actually put your own cream cheese on yourself. But it is completely worth it. And no other bagel place in the city rivals H&H. I mean, of course, there'll be others who have their opinions, but generally speaking, H&H is ranked numero uno across the board. Other little spots are, another thing to make a trip to Brooklyn for is Junior's. There's a little diner called Junior's. It's not anything special once you get there, but they consistently have the #1 ranked cheesecake in the city. I rank them #2, though. I think it's a little denser than my personal taste. There's a place called Michelle's Kitchen, if you look it up on the internet, on Lexington Avenue, that sells a smoother, creamier, lighter cheesecake that I like, which is also sold or offered at a little restaurant called J.G. Mellon on 74th and Lex, which is a fantastic burger joint. I know about it from the Preppy Handbook, actually. And so you go there, you get a bacon cheeseburger and a piece of cheesecake, just like amazing cholesterol dinner, but one of the best you've ever had. And so J.G. Mellon, and you can get the Michelle's cheesecake there from Lexington. If you want a little denser cheesecake, head out to Junior's. And if you want a really thick ricotta-style cheesecake, another great spot made famous, unfortunately, by You Got Mail, which you guys watch when you're here, is Cafe Lalo. So another great restaurant combination is to go to a little Italian, or not big Italian place called Carmine's, 91st, 92nd and Broadway. They don't take reservations. It's sometimes a 2-hour wait. So get there early, put your name on the list, and especially if you have a large party. If you have more than 6 or 8 people, they might not be able to accommodate you. They will take reservations for, I think, 6 enough. Anyway, so you eat at Carmine's, it's family-style Italian food, some of the best in the city, not as good as Arthur Avenue, but still phenomenal. And don't eat dessert there, though. You get out of Carmine's, you go for a walk down to 83rd and Broadway, hang a left, and that's when you see the lights on the trees outside of the store. That's where the restaurant. That's where Cafe Lalo's is. Fantastic French pastry shop with every kind of cake and pie and tart that you can imagine. And unfortunately made famous by the movie.
And you say unfortunately because it's not a little quiet place anymore.
No, there's too many people there. I mean, it was always crowded, but
okay.
Now, well, the thing about it is, what's unfortunate is that Cafe Lalo's was a place where the beautiful people went for dessert, and you would sit in there and you just look at all these phenomenal models and actresses and everybody else, and you couldn't imagine how they looked the way they did while they were eating these desserts that they were. And so now there's some non-beautiful people who show up there, so because of the movie. And otherwise, it was like you had to know a beautiful person to even know about the place. But now it's in a movie, so what good is that to you? So that's a part of the cachet, of going to this place, and so it's lost a little bit of that cachet because it was in the movie.
And thinking of this, I think of some advice you gave us. If you stay in Manhattan long enough, you're going to run into a celebrity.
Yes.
And there's etiquette. What is the...
Well, I mean, you see them all over the place. You just ignore them because who cares?
And why do we ignore them?
Well, I mean, why would you not? It's a really thing. It's like you're there to do your thing. They're there to do their thing, and there's just lots of them, and you just don't. They're just that's one of the reasons why I suppose they're in New York, is because they want to be ignored. They don't want to be, gawked at and so forth. And we don't really care. They're just there. So part of the decoration, I guess. But yeah, you shouldn't. I wouldn't. I've never actually gone up to a celebrity in New York and asked for an autograph or something like that. It's a bit gauche.
And I should point out, I've been to breakfast with Michael when celebrities have gone up to him because he was holding his daughter and made conversation.
She lost her booty or whatever it was, her shoe.
That's right.
And he who was it? Was it Timothy Hutton?
Yeah, I think so.
I think leaned over and helped put my daughter's shoe back on. So, yeah. But I didn't treat him any differently than had he been somebody else, right? So, and which is, I suppose, how they like it. And we do have like celebrities will show up in schools, so you could be in a parent association meeting with like I was in one with Matt Lauer from Today Show, and then somebody sat down next to me and said, "Hi, I'm Annie," and it turned out she was Annie Leibovitz, but I just said hi back to her, even though I knew who she was. So yeah, you just you treat them like they're like anybody else.
So you mentioned a couple places that you wouldn't go. So you would skip, for instance, going into the Statue of Liberty unless you had a lot of time. What are the places that people generally go to don't make Michael's list?
I think the Village is a little hyped, and if you don't know your way around New York City, you can kind of get lost in there because it's not the grid, but the Village is pretty good. I don't frequently go to Soho, but if you're really into art, that would be your thing to do. Again, Chinatown is busy and crowded, and but there are some great restaurants if you can find them. But I would say like the major touristy things. I would hit the Met, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, if you can. That's a good spot. But again, you want to pick times when it's not too crowded, and just kind of the difference is like to go when it's not a mob scene, and so you want to avoid the crowds. Is pretty much what it comes down to. Midtown Manhattan at 5:00. During rush hour, avoid those kinds of things. And probably something like the Rainbow Room you wouldn't want to hit. That's just expensive, and it's it's a brand name, but I don't think that you're going to get a lot of value for your money. Something like Tavern on the Green is another famous restaurant. It's right in Central Park, but it's all glitz and glamour and show. And a friend of mine recently just had a meal there and complained that the food wasn't that good. It was good, but it wasn't like what you're getting. So, New Yorkers, though we spend a lot of money, we also have a high level of expectation for value, and that we're going to get a certain level of quality. So, there are some places that that have that. Like I was complaining about Cafe Lalo. Now it's been in the movie, so the food is still fantastic, but you don't have quite the cachet of the crowd. And so a place like Tavern on the Green or the Rainbow Room, it's famous. It's too famous is the problem. And so it's a supply and demand issue. So when people are lining up over and over and over, and there isn't the demand for repeat customers to come back because there's always a new face showing up off the latest plane, they don't have to pump out the value that they could have. So things that are really, really famous are things that you want to avoid, I suppose.
Favorite museums? You mentioned the Met.
I like the Met. I like the Morgan Library. I like the Guggenheim.
Now, the Guggenheim, I know. The Morgan Library, I don't.
You don't like, or you
No, I don't know. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Well, just keep in mind, there's hundreds of museums in Manhattan. For everything from the Museum of Sex to the Museum of Television to your more standard Museum of Modern Art. Now, the Museum of Modern Art recently was closed, moved out to Queens, and they rebuilt it. I haven't been to the new one yet, so that's supposed to be phenomenal. The Met is of course a must-see. And then there's Museum Mile, which is about a 3/4 of a mile to a mile stretch along Fifth Avenue, and I think in that area you want to hit. I like the Frick actually, which is an old mansion. So I like the Frick. I like the Guggenheim. Asia Society is supposed to be great, and the Whitney is supposed to be great, but I haven't actually been to either. And then, you get out your museum guide book, and there's all sorts of esoteric museums, like the Museum of Television and the Museum of Photography. That's pretty good. Never been to the Museum of Sex, like I mentioned. And but there's a whole bunch of these funky little, there's a couple children's museums that I would avoid, especially if you have little kids, believe it or not, because unless you bring a bunch of wipes with you and wipe their hands, kids actually get sick because there's so many kids in there and they touch things and they pass the germs around. So the children's museums aren't really worth going to visit, and I'd skip those. Though the main children's museum is actually right across the street from Lalo's, but don't go. And I've been there lots. What else? And then if there's some eclectic thing that you want to see, the other one, sort of a pseudo museum, is the New York Historical Society. They did a really nice slavery exhibit about a year ago, but other than that, it's not terribly interesting. Another, especially if you have kids, though, one place to absolutely hit is Museum of Natural History, American Museum of Natural History, which is on the west side of Central Park West. Big dinosaurs and all kinds of there's a big whale and all kinds of little natural history type stuff and what do you call it, the space show, the planetarium.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So.
Any other highlights of New York here before we wind down here?
Just thinking. Well, definitely take a few subway rides. You got to do that.
Any trick to mastering the subway? I think a lot of people, they come into New York City and they're overwhelmed by the subway.
Okay, the trick to the subway is, and having spent some time in Boston myself growing up, this fakes you out. And I think this is true of any other subway system in the country, except for New York. A New York City subway line, especially the ones in Manhattan and the main ones, are not just a single line train. New York is too big and busy to have a single line train. And what I mean by that is a train that starts at 0, stops at 1, stops at 2, stops at 3, stops at 4. Right? So a single train will have 2 tracks, a local and an express. So the local will stop at 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way up to whatever number of stops there are, but the express will stop at like every I want to say every 5th stop, every 4th stop. It's not quite symmetrical or geometric in that kind of a way. But the express will stop at the main cross streets. So 14th Street, 34th Street, Penn Station. Grand Central is another place that's really worth going to. And they recently revisited, renovated it, which is on 42nd Street, which is another express stop. 86th Street on the east side is an express stop. 72nd and 96th Street on the west side are express stops. And so when you look at the subway map, and this is really the trick, the express stops are an open white circle, and the locals are little black circles. And so people get confused as to the fact, the mere existence of the express trains sort of confuses people. And they get on express trains thinking they're locals or vice versa. And all of a sudden they're whisked away. You can get from all the way downtown at the World Trade Center completely uptown by where I live in about 12, 15 minutes on an express train. It's absolutely marvelous how quickly you can get around the city on these expresses. And the local would be 2 to 3 times that. So understanding the concept of a single line in a single direction, having 2 trains, one being a local and one being an express, is the key to mastering the subways. And then figuring out how to do your transfers from one line to another.
Okay.
So, some stops will be intersecting stops where multiple lines will come together. Oh, and one other key to the subway is that you'll have a period, and this is the same as like interstates, right? So you'll have, Interstate 90 and Interstate 94, or like a local state road, and at some point, a single road will actually be 2 or 3 roads, 2 or 3 highways.
Oh, sure, right.
And then it'll split off at a Y at some point. Mm-hmm. So the subways do that too. So you'll get into a subway stop and expect it to be the C train or the B train. But it turns out that my stop in front of my building is both the C and the B. So you have to watch the train come into the station and see what letter's on it, because at some point that C or B will fork off in a direction that you may or may not want to go in. So not paying attention to what train you're on and understanding that a single stop will will actually provide, a service for more than one line.
And as I recall, when you're looking at the subway map, the end of the line is where it marks with a particular letter.
Well, no, every stop should be marked with all the letters of all the trains.
No, I mean when you're looking at the map, and you're trying to tell which is the C line versus the B line.
Right.
Okay.
Well, just look at the individual stops and kind of follow the letters, and they're color coded. That's which helps.
Mm-hmm.
But you kind of have to get familiar with the color codes.
Is there any significance to the color codes? I've never seen any, other than just different
certain lines are certain colors. So you'll have, for instance, the 1 and the 2 and the 3 are red. The 2 and the 3 being the expresses. The A and the C those are pairs, right? So the C is the local, the A is the express. Those are blue. The B and the D, that is an orange sort of a color. The B is the local, the D is the express. On the east side, it's green, and the 6s are the local, and the 4 and the 5 are the expresses. So I don't know
why people get confused.
Yeah, it's not so bad. But it is a complicated map. I would put it, more complicated than the London Tunnel.
Yeah,
map.
I would too. Yeah. For some reason, I'm not sure why.
Where it's like Boston's a breeze, And Boston only has locals. There's no expresses, so you can't get messed up.
Any other tricks for New York?
Well, off the top of my head, that about does it. That should be enough to get you through a 3 to 5 day week, through a 3 to 5 day trip.
Well, thank you very much for being on the show.
Sure, thank you.
My thanks to Michael for his tour of the city. That's exactly what I wanted to get out of this particular interview. I wanted you to get a little bit of the experience that we had when we visited with Michael and his family and walked for miles to get this dessert with that dinner or those bagels down there on which are 40 blocks south there. So give you a chance to see New York from a New Yorker's point of view. I hope you enjoyed that. I'm also looking for people who could do this same sort of tour for their home city. I'd like to continue this over the course of the year, especially looking towards next summer when my family is going to Europe for insights into Europe as well. So if you have a particularly good story about your hometown or about a particular trip, I'm always looking for feedback. And I'll give more information about feedback later on in the show. Those of you who listen to the show for a while know that I grew up in California and not on the East Coast, but I did go to school in upstate New York, near Albany in Troy, New York at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, the oldest school of engineering and applied science in the United States. Spent 5 years there, and so in that time I spent more time in New York, especially after I fell in love with and married a girl from Long Island who will celebrate 25 years of marriage with at the end of next month in November. And then for a time, we also lived just across the river in Piermont-on-Hudson, which is the very first town on the west side of the Hudson River as you get north of New Jersey, just south of the Tappan Zee Bridge. So I've had some chance to get into New York, and so obviously I'm aware, as you are, that this interview doesn't cover every possible thing you could do in Manhattan, although it is a pretty good start. Among the things that we didn't talk about, we didn't talk very much about Washington Square Park and Greenwich Village, obviously. We didn't talk about some of the schools in New York, which my kids have looked at, and my daughter may still yet attend Columbia if she has her way. We didn't even talk about Broadway and some of the chance to watch some of the finest theater in the world on Broadway or off Broadway. In the resources section, I'll give you a resource which you might be interested in, but obviously one of the main reasons that a lot of people go to New York City is the shows, and they can range from the big spectacles to one of the best shows I've seen in New York, which is done sometimes in the Christmas time, was Patrick Stewart, formerly Jean-Luc Picard of Star Trek Enterprise, doing a one-man show of Christmas Carol, which I would have to say a little bit dragged to. It didn't seem like a one-man show would be very interesting, and I'll tell you, he had me from the second sentence. So there really is some fine quality entertainment in New York City, and so I'll give you a little more information about how to get tickets to that as we get into the resources section of the show in a bit. The only other thing I wanted to add is that story that Michael and I were talking about with seeing Timothy Hutton. Timothy Hutton was actually eating breakfast at a breakfast place on the Upper East Side with Alec Baldwin. And no, I don't have any pictures to prove it because that's just not what you do. We left them alone to their scrambled eggs or whatever they were eating and didn't bother them, and nor did anybody else in the restaurant. So interesting to see the way people deal with celebrities on a more regular basis in Manhattan. To see some of my pictures that I've taken in New York City over the years, for those of you on the iTunes Enhanced version, just click on the picture of Radio City Music Hall. For those of you who are listening to the regular MP3 version or away from your computer, when you get back, just go to the show notes at amateurtraveler.com. The first resource I have for you in the Internet Resources portion of the program is the Theater Development Fund. Many of you have probably bought tickets from the TKTS discount ticket booths in either Times Square or at the South Street Seaport and gotten discount tickets for shows that day. What you may not know is that you can also get a membership in the TDF if you are one of the following groups. If you are a student, teacher, union member, retiree, civil service employee, staff member of a nonprofit organization, a performance arts professional, or a member of the armed forces or clergy, then you can join the TDF for an annual fee of $25, and then you can actually get heavily discounted tickets ahead of time. You can actually get them up to months ahead of time. So if you are in one of those groups, that is definitely one resource you might be interested in knowing something about. I'm going to put a link also in the show notes for Sounds for Sights, which is a audio tours, and they have audio tours, walking tours of New York. So I'll put links to that in the show notes also. And then there is also will be links to NYC POV. NYCPOV.com is a New York point of view, a unique way to visit the city, they say, in quality 360-degree panoramic virtual tours. So an interesting way to see the city with a number of different virtual tours of the city where you can spin around and look at different directions. So links to that also in the show notes. And I'll put in links also for Time Out New York, Manhattan User Guide, and New Yorkology, which are all travel guides for New York City. I got an email this week from Adam, who wrote about the Kauai episode and suggested one thing that I missed was Kipu Falls. And Kipu Falls, he said, was a great place to go. He and his wife went there on their honeymoon, found it just about a perfect place, and they found it from the Ultimate Kauai Guide. So I'll put links to both of those in the show notes. Also, thanks to Deborah Conrad, the Southwest USA travel editor, who wrote a nice review of Amateur Traveler on their site. I'll put a link to that also in the show notes. Thanks to a great many shows that played my promo this week, and so I'll put some links to there, probably in the discussion board, so that I don't want to leave anybody out. So thanks to all of you who emailed. Again, the email address is host@amateurtraveler.com. I felt a lot of love this week. Thank you very much. And also feel free to comment on my MySpace, dig me at podshow.com, call me at 206-MOM-LOVE, or leave a voice comment on the show notes at amateurtraveler.com using mobile long. There are just so many ways to contact me. What's your excuse not to? Thanks so much for listening. This episode was brought to you by HotelBook.com, which features nearly 5,000 unique and independent hotels in more than 140 countries. Whether it's a resort, a cabana, or a castle, HotelBook.com invites you to stay your way and stay independent. Visit HotelBook.com to see the latest deals for New York City. From an upscale city hotel to a relaxing beach retreat, HotelBook.com will show you the best deals for that one-of-a-kind travel experience. HotelBook.com. Stay independent.
The best and the brightest served up daily by the sharpest minds in content delivery, Podshow and Limelight.